Now!
Have you ever driven so deep into the desert that the world around you feels dead? No streetlights, no houses, no sound but the hum of your own engine. That's where our story begins. The night stretched endlessly across the Nevada desert, black and hollow, swallowing every sound. 4 friends were packed inside a dusty sedan, the kind of car that rattled when the wind hit just right. Their laughter had died hours ago. Conversation had faded into silence. All that remained was the uneasy rhythm of tires against cracked asphalt. The fuel gauge dipped dangerously close to empty. Each glance at the dashboard felt heavier, more urgent. GPS showed nothing but desert. Miles of nothing. No towns, no rest stops. Just a gray line on a screen leading them deeper into nowhere. "Don't worry," the driver muttered, forcing confidence into his voice. "There's got to be something up ahead." But even he didn't believe it. The road looked abandoned, like no one had driven it in years. The desert was vast, but the silence was worse. No insects, no coyotes, not even the whistle of wind through brush. It was as if the world had been muted. Every mile stretched longer, each shadow beyond the headlights darker than the last. Then, like a trick of the eye, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. A neon light flickering weakly against the darkness. At first they thought it was a mirage, heat waves, hallucination, but as the car drew closer, the glow sharpened into crooked letters, buzzing against the night. "Gas open 24 hours. Relief surged through the car. The friends cheered, their tension breaking. Finally, salvation. They pulled off the road, gravel crunching under the tires. The gas station looked ancient, half swallowed by sand, its windows dusty, its sign sputtering like it was running out of breath. But the strangest part wasn't the building, it was the surroundings. No other cars, no sound of crickets, no wind. Just a pool of sickly neon light fighting against an ocean of black. Beyond the glow of the sign, the desert seemed endless, empty, and wrong. As they stepped out of the car, the night swallowed them whole. The air was colder here, unnaturally cold for desert heat. The sound of the engine shutting off echoed like a gunshot in a church. Every instinct screamed that this place wasn't safe, but they were stranded. The gas gauge didn't lie. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, trying to laugh it off, pretending the silence didn't feel alive. Still, none of them could shake the thought crawling up their spines. They hadn't been saved. They'd been led here. The car was silent when they stepped inside the gas station. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, throwing sickly light against cracked glass. A rusted bell jingled as the door creaked open, the sound echoing far too loud for such a small room. The air hit them first, cold, unnaturally cold, like stepping into a freezer hidden inside the desert. Behind the counter stood a man, or something that looked like one. He was tall but thin to the point of frailty, his skin pale, almost translucent, as though sunlight had abandoned him years ago. His hair hung in uneven strands, greasy and motionless despite the draft. But it was his eyes that froze them in place, large, unblinking, staring right through them as though he already knew who they were. A smile twitched at his lips, the kind of smile that felt more like a threat than a greeting. "Evening," the attendant rasped, his voice dry, as if every word scraped his throat raw. "You'll need more than gas out here." The friends exchanged looks. His words didn't sound like sales talk, they sounded like a warning. One of them laughed nervously. "We just need to fill up, that's all." The attendant shook his head slowly. "Not just gas, light, protection. Once you leave here, the dark don't let go so easy." The friends glanced around the shelves. They weren't lined with snacks or sodas like a normal station. Instead, there were lanterns, jars of salt, old crosses, flashlights stacked in rows, even glass bottles filled with something black and tar-like. It looked less like a convenience store and more like an apothecary for surviving something unspeakable. One of the friends whispered, "This is a joke, right? He's just trying to scam us." But no one laughed this time. The attendant leaned forward, his pale fingers curling against the counter. His nails were yellow, cracked, too long. His whisper crawled through the room like a spider. Buy what you can. Pay what you must. Because once you're out there, if your light goes out, so do you. The driver forced a chuckle, though his throat was dry. We'll be fine. Just the gas, thanks. For a moment, the attendant didn't move. He just stared as though memorizing their faces, burning them into his mind. Then slowly he turned and began to pump the fuel. The friends tried to joke about it, tried to shake off the chill. But the silence inside the station didn't help. No clock ticking, no hum of machines. Just the buzz of the dying neon sign outside, struggling to hold back the endless black pressing against the windows. And in that silence, every one of them felt it, the truth behind his words. This wasn't just a warning, it was a prophecy. The friends dismissed the attendant's words as nothing more than a scare tactic. He was strange, yes, but in their minds he was just trying to sell them junk. Protection, light, salt, it all sounded ridiculous. The driver handed him the money, and with nervous laughter they hurried back to the car. Moments later, the gas station was shrinking behind them, swallowed once more by the desert night. The road stretched endlessly ahead. The engine hummed, steady and low, but the silence around them felt heavier than before. Something about the night had shifted. The headlights pushed forward into a darkness so thick it almost looked solid. Beyond that narrow cone of light, there was nothing. No desert, no stars, not even the faint outline of the horizon. It was as if the world had ended, and only the strip of road beneath their tires remained. Minutes passed with no one speaking. Then from the back seat, one of them muttered that maybe it was just their imagination, that deserts at night could play tricks on the eyes. Everyone nodded quickly, eager to accept the explanation. Though their pale faces told a different story, no one wanted to admit it. But the air inside the car felt heavier, harder to breathe, as if the darkness was pressing in on them from every side. A sudden spark of relief came when headlights appeared in the distance. Another car, proof that they weren't alone. The friends leaned forward, whispering to each other, comforted by the glow ahead. But their comfort lasted only seconds. Without warning, those lights blinked out, not like a car turning off its beams, but as though they had been consumed. One moment they were there, shining through the dark. The next, nothing but void. The driver tightened his grip on the wheel and pushed the car faster. No one spoke now. They could all feel it, that something was wrong with the night itself. The road didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a trap. In the side mirrors, movement flickered. At first, it seemed like tricks of the light. Then shapes began to form, shadows darting just outside the reach of the headlights. A friend in the back seat gasped, pointing out the window. Figures were running beside the car, their limbs bent and contorted, moving far too fast for any human. Panic rippled through the car. Voices overlapped, everyone shouting at once. The driver's eyes darted from the road to the mirrors, his breathing shallow, his knuckles white against the wheel. Someone shouted that they had to turn back, that the gas station was their only chance. The driver slammed the brakes and tried to spin the car around. But the road was gone. Behind them stretched the same endless black, unbroken and shifting like water. There was no way back. The gas gauge dipped lower, the needle trembling on empty. The headlights began to dim, their glow weaker with each passing second. And in that fading light, the shadows closed in. The warning had been clear, but they had laughed. Now the darkness was ready to collect. The headlights grew weaker with every mile. At first it was barely noticeable. Just a faint flicker at the edges, like a bulb about to burn out. But soon the glow no longer reached the edges of the road. The beam grew narrower, dimmer, leaving only a pale ribbon of light directly ahead. Beyond that ribbon was only the abyss, as though the world itself was dissolving into darkness. Inside the car, no one spoke. Fear had stolen their voices. Every breath sounded too loud. Every creak of the engine. echoed as if the vehicle were the only thing left alive in a place not meant for the living. The driver leaned forward, willing the car to keep moving, as if sheer determination could force the headlights to stay alive. Then, without warning, the lights flickered hard. They stuttered, flashed, and for a split second, everything went black. In that single moment of darkness, the friends swore they saw faces, pale and hollow, pressed against the windows, staring in. When the lights returned, the windows were empty. But no one dared look directly outside anymore. The fuel gauge hit its lowest mark. The needle quivered just above empty, and the engine gave a sickening cough. The car slowed, its power failing, and the darkness seemed to close in, swallowing the last traces of road. The driver pressed the gas pedal desperately, but the car barely responded. They were running out of time. In the rearview mirror, faint glimmers appeared. At first, it seemed like other cars were behind them. A surge of relief spread through the group. But as the lights drew closer, their colors were wrong. Not bright beams of headlights, but sickly hues, red, blue, and pale white, shifting like fireflies trapped in water. The lights didn't illuminate anything. They only floated closer, unreal, almost alive. One of the passengers whispered that they shouldn't stop, that whatever was following wasn't human, but the car had other plans. The engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in silence. The lights behind them hovered, growing brighter, until they seemed to breathe with the rhythm of something unseen. The friends locked eyes, no one daring to move. Then slowly the floating lights split apart. They drifted to the sides of the car, circling, their glow casting long shadows across the desert floor. Except there was no desert floor. The ground outside the windows looked endless, like a black ocean stretching in all directions. One by one, the lights began to wink out. Each time one disappeared, the darkness grew heavier, pressing against the glass. Soon only two remained, hovering directly in front of the hood. They pulsed faintly as if waiting. The headlights gave their final flicker, then died completely. The car was swallowed in black. The last two lights outside blinked once, twice, and vanished. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Then came the sound, a faint tapping on the glass. Circling the car, slow and deliberate. Something was out there, and it had been waiting for the lights to go out. The tapping grew louder, spreading across the car like invisible fingers tracing the glass. The friends sat frozen in their seats, too afraid to breathe, each second dragging into eternity. The driver gripped the wheel, knuckles white, though the car was already dead. The silence of the desert had been replaced by a steady rhythm of knocks, circling them, never stopping, never hurrying. A passenger in the back whispered that maybe they should get out. Maybe whatever was outside would leave them if they faced it. But the words died in his throat as something pressed against the window beside him. It wasn't a hand. It wasn't even a shape that could be named. The glass bulged inward, like the weight of the darkness itself was testing the barrier. Then, just as suddenly, it eased back. The driver tried the ignition again and again, but the engine refused to respond. The air inside grew colder, thick with a smell of earth and metal. Their breath fogged the windows. When the tapping finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse. Every one of them knew silence didn't mean safety. Then from the front seat, someone noticed the gas gauge. The needle was no longer pointing to empty. It had swung to full, trembling as if alive. A low hum filled the car, and the headlights blazed back on by themselves. But the light no longer showed a road. Instead, it revealed an endless expanse of desert, stretching far into the horizon where no road had ever been. The friends argued in panic. Some wanted to drive forward, others wanted to stay still, afraid of what the desert might be hiding. But the decision was made for them. The car lurched forward on its own, wheels grinding against gravel that hadn't been there seconds ago. The driver had no control. The wheels spun under his hands like it was steering itself. Outside, the desert wasn't silent anymore. Voices whispered in the wind, hundreds of them, rising and falling in a language no one could understand. The whispers grew louder until they blended into a single scream. The passengers covered their ears, but the sound wasn't entering through their ears. It was inside their heads. The headlights cut through the desert, and for the first time, the friends saw other cars. Dozens of them scattered across the sand. Their doors flung open, their interiors empty. Some looked new, others rusted and half-buried as if they'd been there for decades. Not one showed a sign of life. The driver slammed his foot on the brake, but the car didn't slow. It sped forward, straight toward the abandoned vehicles, weaving through them at impossible speed. The whispers in their heads rose higher, now chanting in unison. And then the truth came, as sharp as the night air. The gas station hadn't been a refuge. It had been a gate. The warning wasn't about survival on the road. It was about entering the place where the road no longer belonged to them. The friends screamed as the car plunged deeper into the desert of vanished travelers. The headlights illuminated only more emptiness ahead. The road was gone. There was never a way out. If this story kept you awake tonight, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe now and don't face the darkness alone.